Joining us now, I'm delighted he's with us, Donald Trump Jr. from the Trump Organization, is going to be doing, I hope, a lot of work on the campaign trail as we approach these midterm elections. Donnie, how are you? Good to talk to you.
Good to be with you, Laura. How's everything?
I'm great. You know, Bloomberg is clearly hitting your dad there, and he's been a foe of your father for some time, and who knows, maybe he'll actually try to run again in 2020.
I think that would be great. That'd be like a gift, like Hillary proportions.
Yeah.
So it would be, I'd welcome that.
What do you make of the fact that the generic ballot between Republicans and Democrats, which at the early part of the year, December and January, had been about 14 to 17 points in favor of the Democrats. And last week, we saw that number had shrunk to basically a statistical tie within the margin of error of 3% in the Democrats' favor.
You know, I think it's common sense. People are actually starting to see the fruits of my father's labors. They're starting to see his policies coming through. They're starting to see it in their paychecks. They're starting to see it in the economy. They're starting to see it in job numbers across the board, whether that's, in any demographic you could possibly list. Despite all the noise. I mean, the numbers just speak for themselves, and real people see it. I think what they're also seeing is sort of the hysteria from the media and from the left, and it's sort of this, we have to rush to be further left. We have to be, more socialist than socialists could possibly ever be. We got to go just insane levels, and they're seeing that, and I think reasonable, rational people in this country, they're not interested in that. They don't get it, and I think the hysteria is only helping. They're turning the most powerful man in the world into an underdog figure because there's not a single good story, despite all of these, frankly, groundbreaking and historic accomplishments. So, I think it's amazing, and people are starting to get it. They're seeing that Trump is really good for this country, that his policies, that his actions, that the things that he's done are really good, and they're things that wouldn't be accomplished by regular politicians. And so what will be a big focus of mine over the next few months is that, those people who voted for Trump, the sort of, blue Republicans, almost like the new version of the Reagan Republicans, these people have to realize that Trump may not be on the ballot, but he's on the ballot because his policies are. And all of these things and all of the efforts that have been made and all of the incredible accomplishments that have happened over the last few months, they can go away just as easily because that's what the other side wants. You hear Nancy Pelosi. It's not just crumbs anymore. Now they want to raise taxes again, and they want to go give everything this, and they want to go – I mean, it's borderline crazy, but as long as they keep talking, we're going to keep doing better.
What about the fact that we have – Republicans like Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, a state your father won, no other Republican could have won it. Pat Toomey saying we need to leave NAFTA alone. We shouldn't be renegotiating NAFTA.
Well, listen, I mean, again, these are the things that the left will do. They are far more concerned, and you heard me say this on the campaign trail.
But he's a Republican. Toomey's a Republican, Donnie. So he's a Republican senator and an open borders globalist.
Well, you have plenty of those. I mean, that's part of the issue with D.C., and that's an unfortunate thing that we have to deal with. There's plenty of people, even on our own side, that don't necessarily want Trump to succeed. I could say that about quite a few people, because whether they have 2024 aspirations or others, they focus on, the comma on page 12,496 of some obscure policy bill that no one's going to read, rather than candidate recruitment. They focus on these things so that you end up with a disaster, so that they can come back in for 6 years and be the great hero savior of the party. That's the problem. It's still business as usual for so many of these people, and that's something we got to fix. It is an issue even on our own side, and I think, again, Americans are seeing that. They're seeing sort of an unconventional approach to this, a businessman's approach to running government, and they're seeing, man, it's actually working, because in my lifetime, I haven't seen anyone be able to actually be effective. The other side is purely running on one thing, which is hate of Trump, hate of anything that's been historically American. They're running on the opposite. If Trump came out for oxygen, the left would be against it. it's really crazy. I can't even fathom what's going on in their minds right now. But I think real Americans, and again, people that I see across the country and that I hang out with and get to spend time with, they're loving what's going on. And so when you look at the poll numbers, and don't forget, some of those poll numbers are still going to be skewed because of sort of just the message that the media has out there. Just like we saw during the campaign, where we were performing 15% better than our poll numbers. It was all wrong because people are still afraid to admit to someone. The great story I always tell is our digital polling, meaning our online polling versus our telephone polling, two large sample sets. Statistics would dictate you'd get the same number, 15-point spread across the board. The people on the phone weren't willing to engage with someone if they didn't know where they were coming from, who they were actually voting for. So we started asking, well, okay, you're writing in Jill Stein. I get it. Who's your neighbor voting for? Oh, that guy's voting for Trump. Definitely voting for Trump. They were willing to throw their neighbor under the bus because the neighbor's the person most likely to be them. Once we started asking that question, those numbers came into alignment perfectly. So when these polls are saying he's at 51%, guess what? He's probably over 60% in reality.
I think if we had a media that were even remotely fair, even 20% of the time fair, the numbers would be much higher. There's no doubt about it. Donnie, on the issue of the media, Frank Sesno, who heads up a School of Media and Public Affairs at GW University here in Washington, said this today.
We have so devalued honesty and credibility, which used to be demanded at the White House. When I covered the White House, I remember when the president would misspeak, the White House press secretary would walk around and say, oh, by the way, the president just misspoke, to set the record straight. Now we actually have the Washington Post counting the number of falsehoods. This is insidious stuff. It devalues and debases the civil discourse across the spectrum.
Your reaction? This is pretty much what we hear from the press in the briefing room every day, too.
Yeah. I think it's a joke. They're actually. It sounds to me like they're talking about themselves. Again, when you talk about the hysteria, when you talk about the press not actually reporting their news, but reporting, their narrative, when you see it day in and day out, I mean, you can just turn on the news and see what it is. So, I think anyone from the press corps talking about falsehoods and pushing a certain agenda, it's that classic, the people who are screaming the loudest are the ones guilty of doing it themselves. It's just mind-boggling that they could even make that assumption unless they haven't read a paper in the last few years. But that's the real problem, Laura. They are sitting there in their own little bubbles, in their own world, talking to their three friends who all feel the exact same way. But unlike my father, they haven't been to the dark zone in America, meaning everywhere between New York City and Malibu, that the politicians have forgotten about for decades. They haven't been there. They haven't seen what that means. They still think that, $1,000 or $2,000 to the average working class American family is crumbs, and those people should watch their American dream get shipped abroad, to let someone else in a far off land benefit and have those jobs and be able to take care of their kids. They haven't thought about putting America first. They almost think it's laughable. And so, it's no different than on the campaign trail. When I turn on the TV, it's like, wait a minute, they're selling that we should be more for countries that hate our guts than we should be for our own people, and they're saying it with a straight face. I mean, it's crazy. And so, it's just more of the same. I saw that. We were in the UK during the Brexit vote, and obviously the press over there is known to be rather brutal as well. And we're there talking to a press corps, and then we have our greenskeepers that are working because we were opening a golf course. And I start talking to the press people, and it's a reasonably small town. And oh yeah, there's no way that Brexit's happening. I go to the greenskeepers. It's over. What do you mean? The vote's not till tomorrow? No, it's over. There's no way. These are people living in the same small area that had never ever gotten out of their own little sphere of influence. And, I think until the media starts doing that and starts getting it, instead of just trying to figure out, every conspiracy possible for why Trump, defeated their beloved, we're not going to make any progress, and they're going to lose further credibility. I mean, there's a reason they're ranked lower than Congress these days in terms of credibility ratings. It's because they've been preaching nonsense for years, expecting people to buy it. But now you have someone who's willing to go out there, who's willing to say it, who's going to do it on Twitter very succinctly, very concisely. Used to be in 140 characters or less. Now it's 280. And he can say exactly what he's thinking, and it's driving the narrative, and they've lost their minds because they're no longer driving that narrative.
Yeah, I don't think they're. I think they've. The sad thing for the Democrats and so many people in the media is that they've become increasingly irrelevant to the lives of most people. And even when we have this historic moment in Israel today, It's incredible. All the other presidents promised to do this. None of them did it. Your father, with the help of so many others, made this a reality. This is what Christiane Amanpour at CNN said, Don.
I think what today is about the, again, very clear demonstration of a President Trump foreign policy, which is basically a go-it-alone unilateral foreign policy with a very few select allies on different points. The majority of his allies don't agree with what happened today, and that is basically summed up in the fact that almost none of them went to the diplomatic unveiling or to the reception that was given for it, and they're complaining about it in public as well.
The go-it-alone foreign policy, Don.
Yes. I think they're talking about the media's allies like Iran, probably not a big fan of these things. But but that's exactly the point. This is something that was unilaterally voted through the Senate years ago, 99-0.
Yep.
Right? I guess one person abstained, right? In the Senate. I mean, have you ever seen a vote that decisive?
No.
Okay, this isn't policy. This is law. Okay, Israel's always recognized. Everyone's recognized. Everyone's ever said it. But he's the only one that's actually had the guts to make it happen. Okay, there's a better word for it. I can't use that on the radio. But all these other guys, they say it, they recognize it, they understand it, but they won't actually act. So there's a difference between talk and action, and that's what we're seeing. So they don't like the way he goes about it, but look at what's going on in North Korea. Okay, I watch TV, I'll put on the pundits. Trump is doing this all wrong. I've been dealing with the North Korea issue for 35 years. I'm saying, wait a minute, you've been doing this for 35 years? You couldn't even get a meeting. You couldn't even get the people in a room. That's your life's work. My 3-year-old could do a better job than most of these North Korea pundits in terms of actually getting something done, because nothing is, at least net neutral, right? Nothing's the push. They did nothing, and they're telling him he's going about it all wrong. Meanwhile,
it's ridiculous.
You've got all these concessions. They're stopping the programs. They're doing this. They gave back the prisoners. By the way, all before they even sit down at the table. So if someone's not willing to deal, I've made a few deals in my life, if someone's not willing to deal, are they going to give up leverage points before the negotiation?
Probably not.
No. And
Probably
these
not.
people are losing their minds because he's been effective. Now, they may not like the delivery system, they may not like the way it is, but to argue with the efficacy of what he's doing is asinine.
Now, that's why I'm telling you, this is why the numbers are going up for Trump, because they're about resistance and he's about results. Now, Donnie, you're going to be hitting the campaign trail. Two of the seats that we're really looking at in the Senate, John Tester and, of course, Joe Manchin in West Virginia. John Tester has been especially bad on sanctuary cities. He was not in favor of Kate's law. The immigration issue remains a potent weapon on the campaign trail, especially given what happened on our southwest border last week with 200 people now just waved into the country. Are you going to be highlighting those issues with someone like Tester, who claims that he'll work with the president?
Of course. Well, you can't, and the same with Manchin, by the way, in West Virginia. You can't say and pretend and show up on Fox News and pretend, well, we're basically conservatives, and then vote against tax reform. Okay, you can't do those kind of things and just sort of say the sound bites, but then vote against all of the things on the president's agenda. That doesn't work. And I think his people and his constituency has to see that. When you talk about a state like Montana and you're looking at that, and I was there because I was campaigning a lot for Gianforte, last fall, and we turned that into a great win for us. That's not what his people believe in. Those are not the things that they want to do. They're concerned about American jobs. They're concerned about jobs for their people, for farmers and the ranchers and everyone that works in those states. But that's not what his concern is for. So these people who try to preach about these things, they're more worried about people that, A, aren't even part of their constituency, but just following the Democratic platform. The same with Joe Manchin in West Virginia. DJT, I remember the most classic thing. I was sitting above and behind him during the State of the Union watching my father deliver a speech, and he's saying it's all-time high, all-time low unemployment, all-time low black unemployment. Manchin actually wanted to stand up to clap, and Chuck Schumer looks at him, and he sat down like a dog in 2 seconds, like total obedience. So
Donnie, we're out of time, but it's great to talk to you. Come back soon. We're going to be following you on the campaign trail during these midterm elections. We'll probably be covering some of your events as well on Fox News. Don Jr. on The Laura Ingraham Show.